Okay, we're going to do our early All-Stars. Michael Verney, you get to go first. And we know we're going to get slated for it. Sure, I mean, it doesn't matter what we try and do. We're going to get slated when you're picking a team of the week, when you're picking, I don't know, whatever it might be, you're going to get slated. So I presume you're already okay with that.
No, hold on a second now. This is the perfect 15. Perfectly balanced throughout the season. I don't think there's any holes to be picked in this.
Okay, well, this is before the All-Ireland final, so we're going to do one after as well, and I'll do one separately on another video, but we're going to go through Michael Verney's firstly. So I'm going to bring your goalkeeper up on screen. It's Nicky Quaid. So did you have anyone else in the conversation?
I actually didn't, Shane. Being honest with you, I didn't have anyone else in the conversation. I think he's been absolutely so solid from start to finish, the whole way through. An unbeaten league run, an unbeaten Munster run. They're back in the All-Ireland final. He obviously has a couple of clean sheets in championship as well. His puck-outs are probably Stephen O'Keefe. Even looking at the All-Ireland semi-final the other day, Stephen O'Keefe is maybe getting close to him on the puck-outs or that, but he's just such a safe pair of hands. Genuinely didn't have much debate. He was probably, I'd say he was probably my first name in the team sheet, not just because he was number one, but just because I think he's the most obvious person. I don't think there's any debate in that position personally.
Okay, you're 2, 3 and 4. Now, just before I named, Sean Finn, Dahi Burke and Dan Marsey, we did have a bit of a debate before we started recording about what constitutes players who can play in the full back line, because can you play a guy who, let's say Sean Loftus, he followed the floating Graham Mulcahy the other day, so you couldn't pick him in the number 3 jersey, and then you don't want to pick someone who minds the square all the time like Conor Prunty and Dan Morrissey as the 2 and 4 necessarily, but you have managed to get 2 of them in here.
Yeah, something that annoys me, like when you're looking at, team at last 40 years or team at last 20 years or 30 years, is when you have potentially Brian Lohan fullback and Dermot O'Sullivan cornerback. Not in a month of Sundays would you have those two playing. To me, it's one plays and the other doesn't play, because I think they're two specialist fullbacks. The only thing I'll say about the modern fullback is probably a little bit less like that, because you're probably playing a two-man full back line a lot of the time, so they have to be mobile and they have to be flexible. There's no, 15 or 16 stone lad at the edge of the square and, don't mind the house or anything like that. You have to be mobile. So I put in Sean Finn is just, to me, probably started off a bit slow, I would say, at the start of the championship. Was caught for a couple of scores. I think from the Munster final onwards, I think he's been absolutely rock solid. Kept Desi Hutchison on a tight leash. We've kind of seen, glimpses of what he has done since. And I think he's getting better as the season goes on. Dahi Burke is just a phenomenon, really. Didn't play the Wexford game. Came in for the Kilkenny game. Was probably maybe caught for the Richie Hogan's goal, but was outstanding outside of that. Same against Tipperary, was probably caught for Callan's goal, but absolutely outstanding outside of that too. Seamus Flanagan caused him a small bit of trouble the other day, but I think I thought he was brilliant as well. Even that catch going away from goal was just outstanding. I don't think there's a better man to man the square than him. And Dan Marsey, I think actually, of all the fullbacks that could play cornerback, I think he definitely fits into that mould, because he's played wing back. He's used to being kind of in space a good bit. I had reservations more than anyone else when he went in full back, just because new faces in new positions, and I think he's only getting better. I thought his best performance of the year so far was probably the other night against Galway. I think it's a rock solid full back line.
Well, it's rock solid because they all play with a spare man in front of them. Like in general, Galway have played with a sweeper all year with Pádraig Mannion, so that's protecting Dahi Burke, who arguably his best work has been done further away when he switched out to the half-back line, whether that was by following his man against Tipperary or just by a swap with Grode McInerney in the last game. And Sean Finn and Dan Morrissey, they've generally had someone spare in front of them, whether it's Barry Nash or they've had huge protection. So
okay, who in the full back line hasn't had somebody protecting them? What full back lines haven't had someone protecting them?
I know, but there's a real definite
No, I'm asking you a question. No, but you're trying to pick holes at them by saying that they have a sweeper or someone in front of them. Name me a team or a player that should be in it, a team that doesn't play a sweeper or doesn't play an auxiliary kind of a person sitting back on the 45 protecting. Name me one.
Okay, well, I think in the case of Limerick, it's fair enough because it's 6 defenders. But, obviously they bring 10 men behind the ball, 12 men behind the ball at times. But in the case of Galway, they actually have 7 defenders. So that's where I'd make that particular point. But, obviously there's no Tipperary person here, and I'm not going to push you for that on this particular year.
Unbelievable! I don't believe it.
They're playing with 6 at the back. Are Waterford playing with 6 at the back? I mean, kinda, yeah. I mean, I suppose they are more so than we've seen in years past. So, I mean, if Conor Prunty hadn't made a couple of handling errors against Kilkenny, maybe he'd be getting in there. But anyway, that's your full back line, and you've picked 2 full backs in the full back line, which I'm not necessarily game on. I mean, does Rory Hayes, does he deserve a nod here? I know. I think Ronan Maher even deserves to be mentioned. But anyway, look, that we'll get to my team
Just
later on.
a couple of guys that were unlucky. I think for a guy that's played probably out now cornerback this year, Conor Delaney's given 2 really good performances, particularly against Galway and against Desi Hutchinson last day. I think Shane McNulty has really grown into the season. I thought he was brilliant on the ball. He was the outlet for at least 5 short puckouts the other night in the semi-final. Thought he was very good. You and me both have high opinions of Conor Prunty. But when I look at it, he's probably been at fault for 5 goals in the last 2 games. That's the way I look at it. Between directly 2 goals against Clare, directly 2 goals against Kilkenny, and the Shanaher catch and set up against Clare for their 3rd goal. So I just couldn't have him in there. But there's plenty of other options there.
Okay, what about your 5, 6 and 7? They're up on screen now.
Yeah, I think Dermot Burns has been absolutely unbelievable from start to finish. He defends. He's a good defender, but what he offers them going forward is absolutely outstanding. You know, he hits. You know, it's regular for him to score 2 points from playing a game. It's regular for him to put over a couple of long-range frees. His deliveries into the full forward line are also, you know, a lot better than they were. And I think he takes on the shot at a better time now. He takes on the shot when he has a couple of yards to step into the chance, whereas maybe he was forcing shots a couple of years ago. I think he's in the hurler of the year conversation at the moment. Probably he's been outstanding. People ask, why are Waterford so much better this year? Tyke de Burke is probably the main answer. He obviously had injury in 18. I think he did his shoulder in the first match against Clare and was out all of 19 with the cruciate as well. No, he was out all of 19 as well. He's only just back from the cruciate, but he's been absolutely outstanding, and he just looks physically just looks a different man. Like, he's bursting out through the ball, and I think whatever, you know, he obviously has a lot of physical gains in the last year or two, or throughout that kind of rehabilitation. But during Derek McGrath's term, he was striking ball long. Now he's carrying ball. It's an awful lot smarter. I think the percentages, he's playing the percentages an awful lot more. I think he's flourishing as a result. He wasn't quiet the other night, but he was definitely caused trouble by TJ at different stages the other night. But I think he finished massively strong. I think in the Cork game he was huge as well, and he grew into the Clare game too, and he was gotten way more ball than I thought he would in the Munster final too. So I have him at 6, and at 7, I just think Callum Lyons is just an absolute joy to watch, and I don't want anyone saying, "Oh, he plays number 5." You know, 7 and 5. They're
wing back, and they're interchangeable.
But he's just like, he scored 2 points the other night. He made a couple of mistakes, but he won a couple of frees driving at that Kilkenny defence. One of the highlights of the year is going to be that goal against Cork, even if it is borderline steps. What he offers you from wing back is huge, and I think people might say he was maybe a bit quiet against Limerick. If you look at it, Gerard Hegarty was very, very quiet that day too. So he's an absolute lock for me in the half-back line as well. Okay,
your midfield then?
Yeah, midfield. Will O'Donoghue, his worst game of the year was probably the last day against Galway. Missed a lot of pickups and maybe wasn't as influential as he had been. Thought he was in the running for man of the match in the Munster final, and he was brilliant against Tipperary as well. Just a real enforcer from the middle of the field. He's a player I think every team would love to have. He's 6'2" plus 15 stone probably, and he's just a bit of a wrecking ball in around that middle sector. I think he's a huge player. As I said before, I think he's one of the most selfless players in the game. Jamie Barron beside him. I still am not sure if Jamie Barron is back to 2017 heights, but by God he is getting closer with every game. I think he's getting closer and closer. Like, it was probably typified by him being on the 21-yard line to put over that score in the second half the other day. That's the energy he's bringing. And, the bounce off the ground when he has the 2 catches taken, that's back in vogue this year. That's the sign of a player who's really, really confident as well.
He's fun to watch, isn't he? He's actually, that's how he put it. He's fun to watch.
Yeah, we've talked about it. I know they said about Shane Williams, he used to play with Wales, that you couldn't catch him in a phone box.
Don't mind this rugby
Barron
stuff. Don't mind this rugby stuff now. Don't be annoying me.
Barron is like that though. I don't know if any hurler has better feet than him. His feet are so quick and he changes direction so quick, and the energy he brings to Waterford is just huge. I think if Waterford are going to win the All Ireland, he's going to have a big say, and if he has a big say, he'd probably be in the hurler of the year conversation after the final.
Yeah, Alan Flynn didn't do enough midfield against Galway to work his way in here, did he? The tip man.
No, if he played better, he was quiet against Limerick, to be honest with you. If he had a bigger game that day, he would have probably been in around the conversation. But I won't lie to you, they're probably my two favourite midfielders in the game, and they're two players that are really, really on form as well.
Yeah, was there anyone from any other county that threatened midfield here? Cork, Wexford, Clare?
I have a couple of other guys that came close, and there was no other midfielder, to be honest with you.
We'll move on to the half-forward line then.
Yeah, Gearóid Hegarty again is definitely in the hurler of the year conversation. I just think he's I would have been sketchy enough about his shooting from long range, but and he hits a couple of wides in most games, but he's hitting 4 and 5 points in the majority of games, and he's probably him and Marsey are probably posing the biggest problems to teams. What are we going to do with these two lads? They're absolutely killing us. Now, they were quiet in the Munster final, but one of the reasons they were quiet in the Munster final was to do with Dvorka and Lyons, who were both, in a way, quiet, but probably cancel each other out. But the two boys going forward, the two Limerick lads, Hegarty and Marsey, absolutely outstanding. The work Marsey got through the last day. And if Limerick are going to win, those two are going to have big games again. I definitely think Hegarty is in hurler of the year conversation, and TJ Reid centre forward then as well. Even in defeat the other night, I thought he was brilliant, particularly in the first half. Was still fetching ball. I'd love to have that half forward line. You have two big workers on the two wings and two guys that can score. And then you have a fella centre forward who's going to work for you as well, but that can also kill you from out the field and is obviously going to kill you from place balls as well. So yeah, I'd be fairly happy with that, and fairly physically imposing half forward line too.
Colin Malone, Robbie O'Flynn, Jack Fagan. You've let a few lads down here.
Can't have Robbie O'Flynn in the conversation. Not been smart. He didn't play the first game, and he played it very good against Dublin. But he was left in acres of space. He was good at times against Tipperary, so I can't have him in the conversation. Colin Malone is definitely in the conversation, but he's one of these lads that's probably just going to get forgotten about as the championship goes on, because he was big during all those qualifier games, and he was obviously did a brilliant job on Keane Lynch first time out as well. So he's definitely big in that conversation. Keane Lynch obviously is probably unlucky to lose out, probably between midfield and half forward line. The fact that he's fleeted between the two, and the fact that he had a big Munster final. I thought he was quiet enough at times the other day. He thundered into it in the second half and was big in the second half, but maybe not as influential. But he's another guy that could potentially be in after the All-Ireland final. Jack Fagan's probably another one if we were to have a big final. He obviously had a big semi-final, but he's going to have a big final to work his way in there.
Okay, and now you're number 13.
Yeah. Tony Kelly is number 13. He obviously started against Limerick in the full forward line, caused them all sorts of trouble. I can't have it that I can't have him out midfield because he didn't play midfield. He played in the full forward line a lot. He did all his damage in the full forward line and in the half forward line on Dermot Burns. So I have him at 13. He's still in the hurler of the year conversation despite the fact that Clare out. That's how good he was. He's amassed ridiculous totals over the 4 games and was still reasonably influential against Waterford despite the fact that he was on one leg, and some people are saying that he wasn't injured amazingly even though he was down for about 5 minutes and he's in a protective boot now. The rest of the full forward line, Stephen Bennett, he's probably been the one to really light up the Waterford attack, both from frees. He's missed a couple of frees, and in previous years he would have missed a few frees and maybe would have been taken off the frees. But just watching the All-Ireland semi-final the other night again, he picked up a ball on the 55-yard line in the first half and soloed the whole way unopposed to Kilkenny's 13 and put it over the bar. He got that crucial score where he soloed through after Jack Fagan caught the puck out, drop hooked it to the back of the net. He was brilliant, and even the pressure he put on Owen Murphy the other night, and even how far he's dropping back. He's fleeting between probably 14 and 12, and he ends up playing wing back for some of their puck outs as well. He's been just savage.
And who is your 15?
Brian Kincannon 15. I think he's been brilliant as well. Galway needed someone to probably step up in the attack. We probably got a fair insight to what he was going to deliver for the year the first day out against Wexford. He looked so dangerous. Kind of, we've talked about it before, kind of like Alan Cadigan, except maybe a bit more physically imposing. And I thought some of his best work even the last day was out in the half-hour line. I've talked about like Shane O'Donnell being one of the most foulable forwards. But if Concannon has the ball in the hand, he's so often fouled because lads are so afraid that he's going to skin them. And I thought even the other day when things were going wrong for Galway, I thought he was brilliant. He probably just edges, if there was going to have to be a Galway guy in the forward line, he'd probably be edging Conor Whelan for me. Just thought he was a bit more consistent. He was probably 7.58 out of 10 in every game they played this year.
So you've got a full forward line of Tony Kelly, who spent most of his time Roman, Stephen Bennett, who spent the vast majority of his time in the half forward line, and Brian Concannon, who did his best work against Limerick out wing forward. Fair play to you there.
Stephen Bennett played about 40 to 45 minutes full forward in their first game against Cork and in the Munster final, and a lot of the most damage that he did against Kilkenny was when he went in full forward, and Hugh Lawler I think he got 2 to 3 points when he went inside full forward as well. So you're trying to make out that he hasn't hardly been playing full forward when he most certainly has.
I think his best stuff has been further out the field though. I got to say. Right, okay, so that's your team. Is there, I suppose you probably want to pay homage to all the lads you've left out, pat them on the back after you've kicked them up the hole.
No, to be honest, I've mentioned most of the guys. That I thought were close. Interesting potential kind of bolters going into the final that aren't maybe in the conversation now. I think if not as much in the conversation as others. I think Shane Mcnulty has a big final. He's a great chance. He's another 7.5 out of 10. He's a good chance. If Jack Fagan catches 10 or 11 puckouts like he did the other day, he's probably going to be a shoe-in for an All-Star. And probably someone like Keane, it's unfair to say that Keane Lynch is a bolter, but if he has a big final and has a big influence on proceedings, he has a great chance as well.
Okay,